The following podcast is part of the 60/40 network.
Hello, and welcome to Everything Small Business, your shortcut to start, build, manage, and grow your small business. I'm Sheree, and in today's episode, I sit down with Luis DeJesus from Mex Engineering as part of our new mini-series called Share Your Small Business Story. In this episode, we chat with Luis about pronouncing his name, his view on government grants and assistance in the high-tech space, and just what he thinks government could be doing, and choosing to build a company in an industry new to the Gold Coast, and much more.
We talked a little bit before about, I guess, the passion for automation or for robotics more so. But did you find that you chose the manufacturing side of the automation and the robotics, or did it choose you?
Well, it's sort of, I guess it's an interesting story. When I first finished my tertiary education, I worked for IBM, and I was in charge of some development of some of their programming manufacturing machines for doing SMT, which is service mount technology for making boards. We worked on some Cisco systems and making PC boards, putting the components on them. And we worked on developing like the whole program for the line for manufacturing. It wasn't in manufacturing, it was sort of in the area of development. So we would then look at, different machines for vision, placing components. It was all very interesting to watch, and I was very interested in it. I thought I did learn about robotics in school, and that's the course I took. But that was what my education was. But I always thought I didn't know it was going to be at a development level. I assumed it was going to be working within the area, improving, looking at current machinery, programming. I didn't realize it was going to the level of developing. Then I was very young. I was young when I finished school, and I realized I see this machine working, but I can do this better. I know I can see exactly how it's operating, but why did they do this? Why did they do this in a different way? And then and that sort of got me thinking of different ways of making machinery. And then I left that business after a few years, and I started working for companies doing automation equipment. And I did that for a few years before I came to Australia. And that's where my interest started. I started realizing all these opportunities of seeing customers' needs and seeing them trying to work out how to do things. So part of my philosophy that we teach all our engineers to when we're designing machines is looking for the right solution. We're not trying to put a robot to do a task. We're saying, what does your task require? If it requires a robot, I can buy a robot from either ABB or another supplier. ABB is normally who we use, but we can buy a robot that can then programmed with some tooling and some guarding for safety to do a certain task. But sometimes that's not the right solution. Sometimes the solution is a dedicated machine that does a dedicated process. So we can develop that as well. I tend to tell customers, look, I can make my own robot if I wanted to. I just don't, because you buy them, they're cost effective, they make sense. But I don't make that my only go-to tool. The last machine we did for one of our big customers, it had over 60 axes of servo motors. That's 60 individual axes of servo plus a lot more pneumatics and more motion. But that was just servo axes plus about 6 robots as well. That's just one big machine doing a task. And that was just to do lots of different tasks, but it ended up with an end product the customer wanted. But that was the right way of developing that process.
Do you find it's harder to get engineers? Because, you've obviously got a hardware component that needs to work, but also the software has to drive it. So it seems to me that a lot of the education now is that they're separated, they're not really together. Well,
yeah, yes and no. When I did school, it was very separated. It was mechanical, and there was electrical, and then there was programming, which sometimes fell under IT. These days, there's a course that they're now doing called mechatronics, which sort of combines all that to a different level. It depends on what you major in, but the mechatronics tends to be, a lot of my engineers are mechatronics engineers. A couple are mechanical, a couple are electrical. And I find the mechatronics is really a good mix of enough of the mechanical and the electrical, because no solution. If you look at an old machine, it was cams and very mechanical system with some electrics plugged onto it. And a lot of companies still work that way, where they'll develop things mechanically and then electrically do the electrics in tandem, but afterwards, so sort of as not necessarily as part of the development, where we like to take a holistic approach. Is this system that we need to develop, is the solution mechanical? Is it what type of drive system? Are we using servos? Are we using pneumatics? Are we using hydraulics? What are the different mechanisms that we're going to use to get the result that we want? And therefore, you need to think of both things. They don't work independently. They're very important. The size of the servo with the gearbox and the inertia gives you the responsiveness of the system. So then you need to, while you're designing it, you need to look at motion and have the programmability. How's it going to work? How is it going to just talk to a database if that's what we're doing? How fast does it need to react? How does it need to adjust? And all these things are taken into account at the very early stages of design. So we very much are a holistic approach of design. So the electrics, the program, the mechanical, all of them at the same time.
So do you build in artificial intelligence then in the thinking process, or this is still more, I guess, like a direct thing? And is that something where you'll go in the future?
So with our artificial intelligence, and I'm not an expert on artificial intelligence, we don't really get involved in that. Our machines have There's no learning necessarily in them, but they do make decisions based on programming and based on criteria that we set out. So there is decision-making processes. I wouldn't call that AI. There's not intelligence in there. There's no learning sort of algorithms. So we're not using that level of learning. We do use MARs, so mobile autonomous robots, in our system. So a way of automating a plant may be just how do you get product from point A to point B? Because sometimes the product flow works better when you have, let's say we want to do an automatic machine here, and the product that it makes has to go to another station on the other side of the factory, or maybe an option for 3 or 4 stations, because what we look at is try to give customers flexibility. People think that automation only works for high volume. It used to. It changes. I mean, I built a machine for New Zealand for doing milk processing, for example. Did a whole line, about 50 meters of conveyor, a couple of debaggers, quite a large system, doing about half the plant of automation. So we managed the bottles from supply all the way to the filler. And now our changeover from anything from a 250 ml small bottle of milk to a 3 liter milk for the whole line, every piece of equipment, is under 26 seconds. You push a button, it just changes.
No way.
Don't touch a thing. So my customer doesn't have to batch things. He can change things on the fly. I can have bottles coming out right after one after the other. I'll have a gap for safety, make sure I don't mix bottles. I can bring the next size bottle in because everything adjusts automatically. So if you think that way, you can now get back to what's one of the manufacturing principles. It's called the Toyota principle, which is one piece flow, which is ideally, if your setup time is 0, whether you make 1 or 1 million, your cost per product is exactly the same. Therefore, why stock it? Therefore, why force people to buy the one same thing? So this isn't always possible. It's very difficult to get things to work with one, but that fundamental is important. And we always try to work with our machines to be, Australia gives us an advantage. We're a small country. And for example, that line, I'll go back to that line for a second. It's really interesting because that line was half supplied by us, half supplied by a company that came from Europe, all the fillers. The filler takes half an hour to change over. We take 20 seconds because they're used to a different market. Their machine has tooling and everything else because they're used to running 2 liter milk all week or only. They don't change product because they have so much volume. They can have 4 or 5 different production lines, each one for each size bottle. In Australia and New Zealand, we can't do that. We were small. We change product over and over again. So then having that flexibility is quite important and it's quite unique to us. So then we're taking advantage of that within our automations. We allow things to change really quickly. So customers can do smaller runs, more adaptive runs. And back to my point with MARs, mobile autonomous robots, they work really well because sometimes, let's say you're packaging something and your customer wants it labeled and wrapped in beautiful pink paper for whatever reason. Well, you can do that. You can say, look, we'll offer you that. Well, this MAR will take this robot to a standard wrapper when anyone else be wrapped that way. But if you wanted something else on it, we'll develop a station. We'll take it to that station just for you. So by having this autonomous vehicle in the middle, you can then start selecting what processes it can do afterwards. And this does happen because for example, when you do a pallet of bottles, you might just strap it because it's staying in your warehouse. You may also need to wrap it because you're going to send it on a truck to go to a different factory. So for stability and for cleanliness, you might want to wrap a strap around it. So in that process, the machine can exit the same product and then it can be taken to 2 different places. Depends on whether it needs to be strapped or wrapped or palletized on a truck or put into a warehouse. So this sort of flexibility allows you to do a really adaptive, I'm not going to say smart factory, more of an adaptive factory. So you can then make your manufacturing suit your customers.
Which is so much better because, I mean, I think that a lot of the discussion about manufacturing is it's cost prohibitive and that usually the inputs of labour required are either difficulty or they're highly skilled and therefore it becomes challenging to find people to fill those gaps when it is such a specialty area. But this sort of automation, although the upfront cost of investment would be quite substantial and of course, knowing that the process flow that you're putting it into is correct, I mean, the potential for that's enormous.
Yes, and like your paybacks are normally quite good. If you look at what the product can make. So if you look at the value of what it can produce, as long as the market's there, then you normally find that it's quite a cost-effective way of doing my manufacturing. And in a lot of cases, if you plan for it at the beginning, you can plan the right product, not just the one that can be done inexpensively or by hand in some cases, because the automation allows you to make what's required. I never want my customer to change their manufacturing to suit automation. I want to develop the right automation to do whatever makes them unique big business. So some customers will have products that they make are quite unique. I don't want that to change. We need to make this manufacturing, we need to make it automated. So let's consolidate all our ranges. Are you sure you want to do that? What makes you unique is to be able to supply all that range. Once you consolidate, now you compete with other people from overseas who are going to just do things simple and in volume. Is that where you want to go? You want to be the unique person who can just still do things competitively, but have the variety. And we can assist with that. And we have in many cases, without saying names, I can tell you lots of examples of customers we've done those things for, where we give them full flexibility within their product range and how they make things, but then they're still doing it fully automatically.
Yeah, that's actually really impressive. Why did you choose the Gold Coast then to open a business?
Well, when myself and my wife moved to Australia back in '99, we lived in Brisbane for a couple of years. And when we decided to open up a business, actually first we moved to the Gold Coast and decided this is a great place to have a business. I look at the Gold Coast and I see beautiful beaches and we enjoy the outdoors. We moved from Canada because we're outdoor people. We enjoyed the beautiful weather. And, the beaches are beautiful. We have beautiful mountains. We have subtropical rainforests. We have everything around here. What a great place to raise a family and to have that good work-life balance. I felt it was the right place to put a business because I think I need to attract world-class engineers to do what we do and work in a great environment. We want to provide the best technology for them to work with it within our business, but then give them a beautiful environment to enjoy their weekends, enjoy their time with their family. So it's a great place to live and work. To me, it should be the next tech hub of Australia. Well, why not?
We'd like to see the same thing.
yeah. Look at it. It's got the right environment to support that sort of low impact, not a dirty industry, but also your clean industry, your high tech industries.
Mm-hmm. So I guess what are the growth plans then from here?
Well, look, we've expanded our factory last year, but a year and a half ago, we doubled. We took down the wall between our two factories and made one big factory. We're here for another 3 years in our lease, and then we'll see where we go. The plans would be to maybe even double in size again and go into a much bigger factory. I'd love to keep growing Mex in the way I see, just like I like making state-of-the-art machinery. We also want to create a state-of-the-art working environment for our staff. One of my goals is organic cafeteria for the staff. Everyone has great food. Again, part of the mix of a great work environment. To have an integrated gym so my staff can have a break. We do work in a high-paced industry where there's a lot of thinking. Things can be a bit hard, stressful sometimes, a lot of work to do. So it's good to have a relief of that when it's required. And so create a nice work environment, which is really important for allowing for creativity. And sort of, we want to make world's best machines. We need to have a world's best work environment as well.
So when you chose to do this sort of thing, did you target your customers first? Like, did you say, I think that I could solve their problems? Or was it actually that you sort of opened up shop and said, I'm here in the marketplace, let's do business?
It started slowly with customers I knew that, asked me to develop a machine for them. So I did that. I started by myself working from home 16 years ago or so. And then, slowly got a couple bigger jobs. Someone wanted some more automation, got a small factory up in Yatla, got a bigger factory in Yatla after that, after about a year or two, got a few more staff. Just slowly grew with, we really work on that state-of-the-art machinery, really advanced. I would like to call it proper automation, really well thought out automation that is not just a mechanized process, but really how do you improve your business? That's always been our focus. And I think that's led to, word of mouth. And we don't really advertise. People hear about us. We keep our customers. We do what we can to make sure the machines are always successful. We support them. We haven't never had a failed process of a machine. Everything's always worked. And that's important. And if it doesn't, we keep on. If things aren't 100% as we would like them, then we do what needs to be done to get it to where it needs to go. So it's important to end up with the right result at the end.
So how did you find the transition then from, I guess, a solopreneur or a single man person into actually moving into the factory and then taking on staff?
It was a slow process. I sort of I've always grown organically. I wasn't much of a business to go out and borrow a whole bunch of money and try to grow fast. It was more take on some new projects, hire another staff, grow, do that project, take on another bigger project, and then maybe another couple of staff. It slowly grew over the years, a couple of staff a year or so. And sometimes a bit more when things got really busy, but generally speaking, just an organic growth. So it kind of just happened.
So basically when you came to the coast, has it been working with the council here? Do you directly engage with them, or is it more with sort of government like Oz Industry? Or
we do that we do engage with all industry and local council. We've been involved in some planning sessions with them as well in terms of how we see the Gold Coast and what we think we'd like to see some more of. I'm a big advocate of our own sort of high-tech hub would be great, something nice with some like-minded businesses. And look, the street we're on is quite good. It's quite a nice big business sort of street, which I think is nice. But a technology hub would definitely be useful. I think what they've done around Griffith with the medical hub there, I think that's a great plan. And we did consider that was a good place for the building, but we're just a little bit too big for that area. But I like the idea of having restaurants and having a beautiful area that guys can go out and socialize and have a bit of a break. I think it's great. It's great to have those areas where people can mingle and talk and relax.
So it's almost like a big campus setting, but with multiple businesses all forming part of it. Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. I think that, because I remember Technology Park, because I was born on the coast. So when this place first opened, it used to be in the boondocks. Nothing was here. So seeing it grow now into a lot of the different types of businesses has actually been very cool.
Yeah, no, I remember I looked at when this land was still all available here, I did consider building a factory at the time, but then I decided building or to spend money on computer staff and hardware, you normally spend stuff on things that no one else can do. I can lease a building, if that makes sense. And, maybe next few years we'll change that. But for now, it's been the right growth path for us because we do invest quite significantly in software and hardware to allow us to do the sort of state-of-the-art work that we do.
And I imagine a lot of the stuff isn't necessarily just flat out off the shelf. It has to be fairly tailored for what you're trying to do with it.
Yes, I mean, in terms of, computers and so forth, you can buy very powerful ones. We buy as powerful as we can get, big screens. But the things that we develop, we use very high-end software to design everything and simulations when required. So we can simulate things, we can do things, we can work within an artificial world as much as for planning and for design. And once it all works artificially, then we can actually in simulation, then we actually make it, which is just reducing risk. It also means that we make the right solution. So we're not just building things and kind of changing after we built it. We're actually planning what we want and then develop and then making what we want.
Well, most of the success really is in the planning, isn't it? It's easier to change a line on a computer screen.
Yeah, look, I've always believed the 80-20 rule, 80% preparation, 20% delivery, really is plan. Get it all right. And you're right, because you see, once you've gone down, or let's say you're making something, you designed it. Once that's there, I mean, if you want to do a slight change after you built it, you can, but there's slight changes, not fundamental changes. But on the screen, you can make a fundamental change. It's just different component, moving some parts around on screen, changing some mounts, but it's quite easy. But once it's built, it's too difficult. So what happens is if you do have to make a drastic change, there's more compromising to be made because it's already been built. Where on the screen, there's very little compromises. You can change anything.
Yeah. So with COVID, has that impacted your business at all?
Only with customers delaying orders sometimes because they're not unsure or they're just moving things around. But besides that, we've been pretty busy. But COVID's been good for us. I mean, it didn't impact us directly. I saw some impact on components. We can't get parts sometimes, not only in Australia, but overseas. There's been you might have heard of these chip shortages and transport's a nightmare. So that's probably hurt us a bit where we just can't get things done. Where normally we'd build a machine in 3 to 6 months. Now it's like 6 to 12 months.
Oh, okay.
So I just can't get parts. And not much I can do about it. We try to find replacements, but things change quickly too, especially on a lot of the high tech. Anything with a microchip at the moment is problematic. And that's a lot of things from valve banks to motors, controls, drives.
So is that an industry you think something as a country as small as Australia actually could step into to produce and manufacture, or that's out of the realms? I don't know. I've
asked government that question because I know they're looking at building companies in the sort of chip space all in different countries. I think Japan's looking into it in the US because Taiwan's the main supplier, I believe. So I think it's not an area that they're looking into, but they should, because I think it would be great for us. We have the space. We can definitely invest. It's up to us to sort of invest. I've never been I don't have a problem with investing in the right areas. I think the government, if it spends money to do things like make new industries, I think that's all a positive thing. I think it's the right place to spend money. If you're going to borrow money, that's why you do it. You create industries. Yeah.
What's your view then on sort of government grants potentially distorting outcomes?
Look, I think the grants they're great on one hand, but they need to be processed much faster. I think the fact that they delay them is hurtful for the industry because you're basically giving companies hope to receiving a grant, and then they don't know the answer for too long. And therefore, they're not going to make a decision because they don't want to risk not being able to be entitled to the grant that they've applied for because they've started spending money already. So what they do is they do nothing. All you sometimes do is you stagnate things. So I think grants can be great if they're done properly and they've had some nice ones come out, but they need to be processed quickly. And I guess I understand the government trying to make sure it does the right thing all the time. But I tend to take the 80-20 rule again. If they administer them faster and they get some of them, they maybe could have given to somebody else, but at least you got 80% of them right. And I still think that's better than making everybody wait too long and then maybe causing other issues. And we have had projects put on hold because of that. Customers applied for grants, hoping to get them, and they'll wait. And then what could happen is that they could wait too many months, 6 months ago. Oh, geez, now it's not worth it anymore because the project's going to be over in a year and not sure if it's going to get the payback anymore. So maybe next time.
Yeah.
And that happened a couple of times already. So that has happened where the grants, waiting for the grants actually caused a project that would have been just an order because the customer had a need for it and they could justify it. But then once the grant is there, they go, hey, I'm making a grant, so maybe I can save some money. It is something that has to be balanced and it needs to be understood. I think I've mentioned this to the government before for the same reasons. It's just something that I like I think grants are great, but I also like the government-backed schemes where they help businesses borrow money from the bank so that they can borrow based on a business plan that makes sense. But also the government then can help with security because I don't think Australia has always been known as a very entrepreneurial country in that way where the banks are very easy to lend money because they don't.
No, they don't.
They always want security against things that, as a business, as an entrepreneur, you don't always have the you see the vision, but trying to get there may be difficult sometimes. And I think opening those doorways to allow entrepreneurs to be entrepreneurial and grow their business creates opportunity. And I believe the government is doing the right thing now, where it's actually doing some government-backed guarantees where businesses can grow. And I think there's always a little bit of risk, but I think the gains are much bigger than the risks.
Yeah.
And you'll see some businesses taking that up and then growing and then creating more jobs, more opportunities, creating new industries for Australia.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I mean, as you can imagine, we've got our own views about different types of programs, whether government should be involved in some of them, particularly in things like funding spaces. Like perhaps they're not best served to try to pick winners. Perhaps they're better off served to go with the administrative or the bureaucratic processes and process these things much faster so that it can get out and become a multiplier in the community.
Yeah, correct.
So,
and I'd like to build. I mean, like when I started MEX, I mean, I've never planned to be a small business. I always planned to be a world leader. You have to aim big, I guess. And we've always positioned ourselves that way, and we've been growing steadily. But that's always with that plan to be as big as you can, because you have the right business model, you have the right process in place, you can do the right type of equipment. Why not? Having those opportunities to allow you to do that are great.
do you think on that then, is your business actually scalable, or do you have a quite high reliance on skilled and technical staff?
No, we are quite scalable. We can grow quite quickly. So we do have a reliance on staff, but our processes allow those things to occur in a seamless manner. So we can grow at quite a good rate if I need to. We have projects coming in that can be quite big. So we have, on occasion, grown quite rapidly to suit a certain project. So design phase can be long, but it all comes down to the size of the project and the length of the project. Because the project, if it's given enough time to be processed, then as a business, you don't have to grow that fast in terms of engineering design, but you can bring in staff to do assembly. You have managers who manage the build. We've fully documented everything anyway. So we, like I said, 80-20, I spent 80% preparation. So everything's fully designed, fully drawn, fully documented. So assembly you can hire staff in and do casual staff to as labor hire on a short-term basis to fill a gap if you're really busy for a couple of months doing the build. So it's the design part that is the one that's most critical that you have the right staff levels on.
Okay. And would you say then that makes your business kind of project-based? So even though you've got this overarching organisation that's static, the projects that you take on allow you to actually expand and grow or become quite agile, I guess, in sizing those specific project requirements?
Yeah, look, and I would say over the years, even so, we've taken on some pretty big projects over the last few years, and then we've grown by a few staff for that project. But then what ends up happening is those staff stay. We got sales, some more projects, and so we grow and we kind of stay there. And then you grow again and you stay there. With the exception with maybe 2 or 3 labor hire that we might say, okay, just for a short time do a certain build. But sometimes and they've happened in the past where they then become full-time employees. So there's opportunities. So I think with all these sort of changes, the opportunities, are we project-based? Yes, to a certain extent, but we do have some standard machines as well. And we're developing that range. So we are currently building some robotic weld systems that will be a stock machine for us. So we do them all the time anyways for customers. And we've tried to build them for stock in the past, but they don't really get bought before they're built. But the plan is now to try to keep one on the shelf all the time.
Yeah. I guess that's kind of akin to like fast brick robotics or something like that, which does a specific task of, well, that one's bricklaying.
Yeah.
And then they're trying to adapt it for sort of NASA applications of, whether it could be used in a different setting.
Yeah. And I guess that's true. Like robotic welding is very flexible. You end up with a robotics that can do pretty well weld anything, whether you're welding just your steels or aluminiums or other exotic metals. It sort of depends on what kind of power supply you decide. But the general system is the same. So I could have the system on the shelf and then just say, okay, I'll upgrade the power source for you. Or the one we use, it was either Fronis or Lorch, depending on whether it's a defense contract or whether it's more domestic. And that gives you flexibility to weld your aluminiums or your steels. It just depends on which machine I decide. So that can be changed later on. We might have one thing on the shelf. And in stock, we could change it. So
yeah, that's actually pretty cool. So I guess, have you got any tips or suggestions for people who might want to be looking to move into a more of a high-tech space and how they can navigate around certain areas?
Looking into this space, I mean, you mean from a manufacturing point of view?
Probably
or from
manufacturing, yeah.
Yeah, so I think for us, we offer free consultations. We encourage people to contact us. We'll come out to site. We'll take a look at what they're doing. We'll discuss their processes, what's possible. Sometimes we can automate exactly what you have. Sometimes we might suggest, look, this is automatable, but if you change a couple of things back here, it makes the process much smoother. So yes, and that's something we could definitely talk to customers through. And look, our goal is to look at finding better ways to automate or better ways to manufacture, more efficient ways to manufacture.
And what do you think then or do you believe are the trends in automation or robotics, say, over the next 10 years?
Look, Industry 4.0 has got a lot of good, the way it positions things is correct. So it isn't just automation. Automation, I normally say, automation has been going on for a long time. So if you're looking at your basic automation, that's old school. More advanced things. Now, like when we do automated tests, labs and stuff, we get data from database directly, which tells us what to do. We then do it. Then when we're done doing the tasks, we then send it back to the database with the results. So people aren't involved, just done automatically as required. So you can take this, in this case, it's for concrete testing for core samples. We do that all automatically. So we store them, then we pull them out when required, we do some operations to them, then we test them and send results back. So that interaction with databases is quite useful. So you're not relying on a person picking a job. It can be done automatically. It can be done based on an MRP system, or an ERP system that runs the business. And that can be done automatically so that things can be much more efficient. So then you can decide and have algorithms that decide when do you make things together for efficiencies. You store the data of how they were made. So if you do have a problem in quality on something, you go back, we had quality on this batch. What went wrong? Look at all the data. So we're storing all the data, how it was made, how long it took, the forces being used, everything. You can say, hang on a second, when this part was made, this particular force was still within acceptable range as a specification, but we had failure. So maybe we need to tighten that range. Maybe that isn't an acceptable range anymore. So these decisions can be made, but if you don't know why, then you're running blind. You're not being able to do those fine adjustments. Even fine cost adjustments. How are things, are you putting too much material in things because you don't know how they've been made, where you can then start fine tuning exactly how to make something, what is required.
When you're talking about databases, is that the client's own database or something that you create for them to sort of act as the interface?
We do both.
Okay.
So we can talk to their database, we create an interface, or we do our own database, and then we send the data back to them as required. So it depends on how we want to manage it. Whether we want to manage the process within a localized database within our process, then send the data to their database, or we just use their database with an interface to determine what we do. The last one of the machines we did recently, we actually used the database interconnectivity as part of what's running the PLC. So the PLC is quite a large PLC. We have a lot of these 60 odd axes in this machine. And we record that product being processed through this quite a complex line at every stage. So you could pull that product out at any stage, put it back in at any time, and it'll continue where it left off. So no one's got to remember anything about it. And that's one of the advantages you get. So you can then pull things off. If a process occurred, and for example, you might make a requirement that the forces don't exceed X amount. And if they do, you want to reject it. You want to see what happened. Let's say you reject a part. You reject it because it's a failure, because you want someone to look and say, is this still okay? Okay, hang on. This was a little bit too much force, but I can see it's fine. Bring it back in again and let it continue. So this ability to interact with the operator gives you the ability to make better decisions, to know when things are going wrong, know when things might need to be addressed, or when everything's okay. So there's all this flexibility that you gain by this sort of interconnectivity with databases.
So it's really an enhancement on the quality assurance process.
Correct. And that traceability of knowing how things are, and recipes. We have recipes for everything. So when you make a product, it's a recipe. And then we always have a standard recipe. And then, yes, you are allowed to adjust your recipes within certain standards or certain password protection. So that it allows the operator still to slightly improve the process that they want, and then decide if that slight change that they've made during this production run should be saved as the newest recipe, or we revert back to the old recipe that we had through the right document controls and process controls. But that's all possible with the system. And you keep track of the old revisions. So you always go back and say, we made a change in settings, and these are the changes you made, and this is why we made them. And then you can then say, that might work. Then you might find that wasn't the right thing to do, or that really improved things. You might want to say, this is definitely our new standard. So this is the flexibility that you gain.
But it's really helping businesses make true data-driven decisions about their actual products, how they're serving it, how they're delivering it.
Yes, all with creating the best product you can and serving their customers as best they can. So if we serve our customer by making the right equipment for them, it allows them to serve their customers by making the best product they can for their customers. Yeah. And then gives them market advantage.
Of course. That's actually, I've got to say, there's some really interesting sort of, outputs from the discussion. I didn't realize actually how much you did. And when I was looking at your website a couple of days ago, and okay, the future is essentially defense manufacturing. I'm okay, I can definitely see that, especially in this application. And obviously there's all this talk too about, where is it going? Where is it going for the future? Yeah. So what would you say, is your big, hairy, audacious goal for MEX?
I'm not going to talk about size. I think size is sort of irrelevant. I think it's just I've always wanted to be an industry-leading business that makes the best equipment, best automation systems, have some standard systems, really push the envelope of what's possible, and really, really help my customers succeed. is really what we're about. And then like, if that means that we're 1,000 people company, great. That's amazing. I never want to lose focus on what's important, which is our customers, to make sure that we make the best system for them. Standardization sounds great sometimes, and sometimes it is good to have some standard machines, but I think sometimes what's required isn't standard. And you don't want to sacrifice what makes the customer's product unique or what makes them unique in the industry. Because then once you lose that uniqueness, they've got to fight on other planes. So that might be cost or something else. And therefore, you don't want to lose that.
No, they just become a commodity, and then
Correct.
that becomes the basis of comparison.
Yes.
Whereas if they retain that uniqueness,
Yeah.
they're able to continue to forward.
So part of our job is to work with our customers and really understand what makes their particular business unique and not sacrifice any of those things. And sometimes customers might go down a road of trying to do things because they think you need to do that in order to automate. And that may not be true. I always recommend talk to us first and let's talk to us what you're trying to do, show us what you're doing. And then maybe we can work out a way of giving you that flexibility. And maybe there is a consolidation that makes sense. And maybe there isn't. But I think it's a discussion that we're happy to have and then look at the process and give you some ideas.
No, that's really cool. And so I guess small business owner,
Yes.
what have you loved the most about this part of the journey?
I love doing things the right way. See, I guess when you work for somebody, you got to follow whatever has been told to do. And I guess being an entrepreneur and being someone who's excited about things, I love the ability to make my own decisions or as a business make decisions. And it's not always about money for me. It's about the right decision. I'm happy to lose money on a job to get it right because it looks good. When I say lose money, I mean not make profit, but you can't lose money too often. But you want to do it right. It's really nice to make something say, this is what's possible. You take away all the barriers and really make a machine that or a system that really solves problems and it opens opportunities up for my customers.
Yeah, great. And what would you say, do you have any, I guess, overarching tips for people who might be thinking about going into small business?
Yeah, I think it can be great. You have a unique product and a unique opportunity. Then if you've got passion, I think success will find you. You just need to be the best at what you do and do it with heart. Do it because you care. Do it amazing. I always tell all my staff, it doesn't matter what job you do in life. Do it amazing. Do it as best as you can. It doesn't matter what job it is. Nothing's beneath anybody. It's all important work. All that has to be done, but do it with pride and do it properly.
Yeah.
And like you care. That's true when you design. It's true when you clean the floors. It's true when you run a business. It's true for everything.
And is there anything that you'd like, I guess, any listeners to know about either you or the business here?
Yeah, look, we're happy to talk to you about automation. And, if they're happy to call Max Engineering here in Arundel, happy to come out and see you, look at what you're doing. Love to have a chat about your business and how we can automate it and look at opportunities. Sometimes it might be just they're not sure what's possible. And sometimes you just don't know what's possible. And I sometimes tell customers, they've asked me, I want to know if I can do this. And I always say, look, honestly, these days, the if is not really a question. You can pretty well do almost anything. It may not be financially viable. It may not be the right decision. There might be other reasons why not to do it, but you can almost do almost anything these days. I just with the right technology and the right thought processes to develop the right process, you do almost anything. So, most systems, yes, you can automate almost anything, but let's work out what's the right thing to do for you.
Cool. Well, I guess that's pretty much it for today. Yeah, that's been really great. Thanks heaps. Like actually, there was a lot out of that I was quite intrigued by, to be honest. Where can people find your business online?
So under mex.com.au, so www.mexx.com.au, and that's us. And that will give you all the contact details to contact either sales or just contact the office and someone will get a hold of you. We'll come out and see you. Myself, my engineering, my development manager will come out and take a look at what you're doing and see how we can help.
That's fantastic. Thank you heaps.
Well, that's everything small business for today. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to stay up to date with our show, please subscribe or follow in your favourite podcast app so that you never miss an episode. If you know someone who might enjoy this podcast, please share it with them or share it on your socials and tag us. Until next time, this is Everything Small Business.